Throughout BTS's entire discovery, there have always been many different types of themes. And one of the most recurring themes in their albums and music has always been centered around the theme of love. Now, whether this is about high school, family, or romantic kind of love, it's there and it's apparent. The Love Yourself era basically dedicates this theme of love to its entire album and explores it in more depth and dives into various forms of love. For example, Love Yourself Her is centered around the joy of love and romanticizes the idea of falling in love. It was pretty much kind of like the first developing stage of love, the happy, bubbling you get when you fall in love with someone for the first time, and when you start to realize this. It's a very euphoric feeling. Your mind is shifted to see that person in all their goodness. You rarely really take into account of their flaws. And when you do, it's not as significant compared to the love you have for them. So your love is overshadowed by them, which is hence why this album gives you very much appealing vibes, happy. The pop sounds play into the role quite well. It gives you a sense of happiness, and your serotonin levels naturally increase when you're in love. Even the intro, Serendipity, was all about falling in love for the first time. And while it does explore the fears of being in love, for example, this type of love could be a forbidden type of love where you're not meant to be with the person, but you realize that love is not something that you can control, and it's not something that you should feel ashamed of feeling. So in a sense, again, it highlights why being in love with someone is so great and why you shouldn't let anyone take that away from you. It's lighthearted, it's happy, and it also takes into account of that sort of adoration you have towards a person. I could almost describe it as the honeymoon stage of the relationship. Everything is just great. The love is great, the intimacy is great. That's Love Yourself Her. And whilst I do like the album very much, I think it was a very enjoyable album, it wasn't my favorite album of the Love Yourself series. My favorite Love Yourself album, as I'm going to talk about, is actually Love Yourself Tear. Now, Love Yourself Tear is basically, as I would describe it, the inverse of Love Yourself Her. If you thought Love Yourself Her was all about happiness and all things good and all things sweet, well, think of Love Yourself Tear as the sort of you fall out of love with the person leaves you, or you start to experience heartbreak. Now, why I love Love Yourself Tear so much is because it ties in great with BTS's other discographies and songs. Let's talk about Spring Day first. First of all, Spring Day is my favorite BTS song of all time. It is beautiful, the production is beautiful, everything about the song from start to finish. The song talks about an internal struggle of letting go and holding on. Whether this is about a lover or friend or job, it deals with an internal conflict. As we can see this throughout the lyrics of the songs as well. You're waiting for spring to come while you're stuck in this cold winter. It's optimistic as it is sad, because you have to come to the realization that you have to let old habits go. You have to grow as a person, and you have to abandon certain things or people, even if it hurts. And that's an area that Love Yourself Tear explores extremely well. This album first begins with its intro, Singularity, and I think it is honestly so amazing. I'll admit, the first time I heard Singularity, I wasn't hooked with it immediately, but it definitely grew on me, and I'm so happy it did grow on me, because it is a bop. The song fits Taehyung's sultry voice so well. It is sad and it is heart-wrenching. It is about isolation and watching love fall apart. And I really like the way that this is the introduction of the album, because it sets the theme. It already sets the theme of what's yet to come. And it contrasts with Serendipity, which was all about, the joyfulness of love. Whereas this one, Singularity, explores the solidarity of falling out of love, the pain that actually comes with being in love with someone, because you don't want to let them go, but the feelings you once had before are not reciprocated, or you realize that this person that you love so much, or this thing that you love so much, isn't good for you, and it makes you feel lonely. Love Yourself album is also very beautifully produced with numerous producers such as Steve Aoki, MNEK, and P Dog. There is a thematic consistency in this album. Yes, there's a thematic consistency of anxiety, loneliness, pain, and also self-hate. These are all elements that work well, but there's also other elements in the song, in these albums, that contrast with the theme, but it does so in a way that makes you think, wait a minute, what if these are all acts of delusions of grandeur, sort of like a dream state fantasy? What I mean by that is because you have songs like The Truth Untold, Singularity, Tear, but then you also have songs in the album like Paradise and Love Maze, both songs which kind of give you a more upbeat tune, sort of an optimistic song that is now interwoven with this theme of depression and sadness, and you're trying to think, oh, how do these two both contrasting emotions, like love is a very intense emotion, as is pain and sadness, and it could almost be said that this feeling, this upbeat songs of Ampan Man, Airplane Part 2, Love Maze, they could all be forms of denial, that you are eluding yourself to a temporary state of happiness. It's almost as if you have taken a drug that's giving you a temporary state of high, and now in this dreamlike state you feel as if you are at your peak happiness, whereas when you come off this high, you now actually the realization sinks in deeper that you are in this situation that you feel like you cannot get out of. Now, whether this is actually what BTS intended or not, or whether these are just songs that are just happy and they wanted to add dance songs, I believe that it could be interpreted in that way too. And if that's so, it gives this album a lot more strength and more meaning, because it is touching on something a lot of people deal with. A lot of people have difficulty expressing their emotions. A lot of people have difficulty dealing with pain and heartbreak. And at times, people may turn to temporary solutions of happiness that don't actually have any long-term effects. If it's almost as if you're in the moment, which is what I believe that these songs portray, that in the moment feeling of happiness, which isn't real happiness but makes you think that you are actually happy. Now, but Ampan Man is all about a superhero, and as you know, superheroes are fictional characters, but we look up to superheroes as children because whilst they are fantasy, they represent something that give us creativity. They represented a happy time of childhood. They represented the ideas of imagination, the idea that we can save the world. All these ideas are fed to us as children, because as children we're easily deceived, we're also easily impressionable. But as we grow older, we realize that superheroes in fact don't exist and they're not superheroes, but we can still live those lives as a superhero through other real life experiences. So in a sense, the emotions we experience can be said of that as to being ones of waiting on a superhero. We know they're not real, but being indulged in that sense of pseudo happiness might be enough for some people, and that's why I think it's really poetic that these songs were added as an addition to the album, corresponding with these other songs that are very mellow, very personal, and again, as I said, very heart-wrenching. Which goes on to one of my favorite songs of the album, The Truth Untold. The vocal line came together to harmonize and pour their hearts out in one of my favorite song they've ever written. It's a very vulnerable track, and the lyrics focus on the struggles of being true to oneself whilst keeping up their stardom appearance. And this is important because as fans, we tend to forget that the artists we see perform are human. We see artists creating songs that we enjoy and we watch them perform it, and it gives us happiness, but we don't actually see the alternative side of the spectrum, the other end of what it means to be said artist, because at the end of the day we are all the same. If we had to take on a role where our job was to please people it can take a toll on your mental health, especially when you are in the spotlight and when you're someone whose music brand is making sure that your fans are happy, your fans are healthy, and your fans stay well. But at times, this also means that you need to be able to set aside your own feelings of fear, anxiety, and pain so that you don't show this to the fans. Because as I said again, just like how we are children, we look up to superheroes. As we're older, we look up to artists, and artists that portray this sense of happiness and this sense of never giving up approach makes us forget about our own real world problems, and we look towards the artists to help them, for them to help us deal with our own emotions. So if an artist is too raw, and if an artist pours out how they're feeling constantly, if they show up to a concert and tell them that they weren't feeling okay, they were sick, they were nauseous, they dealt with something tragic, it will then remind the fans of their own everyday struggles and their own everyday lives, because they relate too much to this pain, and it will put them off completely. It's interesting because I've also realized it's one of the reasons many people dislike the character Subaru from Re:Zero. Again, an anime that is amazing, one of my favorite psychological animes. And one of the reasons Subaru is actually one of my favorite characters as opposed to why he's disliked is because Subaru is not a standard protagonist. He doesn't develop any sort of powers throughout the anime. His skill level, his strength doesn't really increase by too much. He becomes more intuitive and he becomes more of a leader, but it doesn't make a significant change. And without spoiling too much of the anime, basically Subaru shows a lot of human traits. He is someone who struggles throughout the anime, and this struggle takes a toll on his mental health to the point that we even see him have a mental breakdown at one point. And this is what puts people off, because in anime, we typically expect the main character to fulfill the roles we wish that we could do in real life. We expect them to carry on their burdens and push through and achieve what they want to achieve. But then we come to the realization that that's not how life actually works through this character. So many people don't like it. So much like Subaru, artists cannot show that much level of vulnerability because it will be too real for the fans and it can deter them. Yet the truth untold takes all of their emotion and it's almost as if we're reading a diary entry and we get an insight into how they feel, which is why it's so powerful. And I think it's very touching and something that should definitely be seen through a lot of artists. It doesn't have to be a consistent thing throughout every single song or album they do, but it's always important to understand how an artist feels, because that way we can also understand them on a human level, and our approach to artist and fan can be viewed in a different way. And it's again why I really like this song, and I feel like a lot of fans, a lot of armies will definitely relate to The Truth Untold. Now my favorite song of the album is the outro. I am very much a fan of the rap lines in K-pop groups. I enjoy the rap lines and they served in the song. My favorite verse was Yoongi's verse. I love the fact that he mixed his singing with his rapping. It was a bop and they were all performed very well. BTS are no doubt an extremely talented group, and I have no doubt in mind that they'll keep producing music like this, exploring more conceptual themes, pushing the boundaries, and keep doing what they do. I would definitely love to see another era that focuses more on a darker theme. So whilst the Love Yourself era was all about self-love, I would love to see an era that's centered around basically what their album was about, but not too much in the sense that it's overwhelming, but just in the right doses. I'd love to see them explore their highlights as an artist, their personal relationship, and any form of social commentary, because they are getting older just as how we are. I remember I first started standing BTS when I was around 15, 16, and I am 20 years old now. So my views when I was a 15-year-old/16-year-old versus when I'm 20 versus now that I'm a 20-year-old have changed exponentially. So it'd be interesting to see their growth as well change as artists, and I think it would work very well on their end. And also I also think it'd be very educational for the younger fans as well. So I'm definitely excited to see what holds for BTS in their future. And of course, if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll do more video analysis.